Brandy go?
I saw him pick up his phone and
He's out there in the hallway.
Okay, we can wait. Agenda's not too, gosh, off. They got good tea over there, don't they, Valerie?
You know,
Is that the black tea?
this is peach.
Oh, okay. I don't drink peach tea. That black tea they got over is really good. I love it.
I've only had the peach and the green tea, but I used to get chai tea. But I think with the milk, it started bothering my stomach even worse, so I stopped drinking.
You'll have to tell me about that. Yeah, we're on the same sheet of music as far as everything good.
So you
Everybody ready?
something to prepare, y'all can prepare grandkids.
We do, yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the November 18th, 2024 meeting of the Smithfield Town Council Committee to order. First, although we have public comments, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our newest member of the council, Bill Harris. Bill, welcome. The first item on the agenda we have is public comments. Do we have a sign-up sheet? Anyone on it by chance?
No signs.
Okay, anyone in the audience wish to be heard? Councilman-elect Cutler, anything?
No, sir.
Okay, good deal. All right, first is the operational updates on public safety with the members, Councilman Harris, Councilman Gibbs, and Councilman Brooks. Councilman Gibbs, would you please take this one for us?
All right. Let's open to the operational report.
Yes, sir.
Refer to
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor,
Good
members,
afternoon, Chief.
members of council. In the form of operational updates, you all have received our October activity report. If you have any questions concerning that report, I would be more than happy to answer any questions. Operational updates. As of recently, many of you may have seen or may have received some phone calls about a gentleman riding a bicycle along the South Church Street corridor, either on the bypass. We are very much aware. We have made contact with the gentleman. We have not been able to rectify the town's concerns. However, we are reaching out to family to try to get the family to assist us in curtailing this gentleman's behavior while riding the bicycle. We are just as fearful as the general public that Mr. Young will end up getting hit if something is not done. But we are attempting to curtail the concerns of the community, and we just have not been able to do so yet.
This is one of those scenarios that it's caught between what's lawful, not lawful, and what remedy is at your avail to do anything. I understand if you find him operating the bicycle recklessly, you could charge him with reckless driving, but then again, that in and of itself still requires a trial, still requires due process, and I'm not so sure that you can take the bicycle from him for that. I've never seen that done for a vehicle for reckless driving. I don't know if the judge could suspend his capability to operate a bicycle. No, not that either. So we understand where you are, and I have received several calls about it, and I appreciate your due diligence, and I understand the position that you're in.
Yes, sir.
It's difficult, but I do know that y'all, after talking with Major Meyer Saturday morning, thank you for taking the call very promptly on Saturday. Someone said that they knew it was the first day of hunting season, so they weren't going to call you on Saturday morning. So anyway, but no, all kidding aside, we do appreciate your diligence on that, Chief, for sure.
Yes, sir. Operationally, Sergeant Alan Lester was this year's top cop for the Greater Hampton Roads area. This is his second award, and we're very proud that actually we thought he was going to be the overall winner for the Greater Hampton Roads area, but he was beat out slightly. But he is Smithfield's top cop, and he was nominated for life-saving events that had taken place while he was off duty. Also, operationally, if you see the appearance of the Smithfield Police Department, men and or women, changing slightly. This is No Shave November, where those that wish to participate will pay $1 per day in order to shave. And those funds will go towards a charitable, will make a charitable donation to probably Christian Outreach. So if you see us for the next 2 months, the plan is November you don't have to shave. December 1 is a complete reset, and we start all over again for the month of December. So for the next 2 months, we will be having our hair just a tad bit longer.
One of my favorite months.
Yes, sir. It's for a good cause. And if anyone gets too far out of compliance, we have a system in place to make sure that they comply. Actually, really, for this month, we do not have a lot, but I'd be more than happy to answer any of council's questions that they may have. Hearing none.
Chief, are we at full staffing now? Or
No,
real
no,
close?
no, sir. We have one vacancy. Our applications have really slowed down. We conducted one interview last week, and that applicant that we interviewed will be receiving a letter of rejection. But we are hopeful. We feel as if right now where we are, we still at a good spot. And knowing that this time of the year, our applications will slow down, but we're hopeful that we will receive more applications for the beginning of the new year, people looking to start a new career. End of the year is kind of hard for people wanting to start a new career, but we are very hopeful, very confident that we will be able to have that vacancy filled.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any directions or anything that you want to say about the Christmas parade?
In reference to the Christmas parade, as it relates to traffic, we have looked at it. There was some concern as to whether or not we should change the direction of the bridge. In looking at that, we found that it is not feasible for us to change the direction of the bridge. If we were to do so, it would cause gridlock in the downtown area. That people coming across the bridge will allow them to be able to get into downtown. We've talked to the VDOT in reference to changing the length of the lights. We have also found that having the light cycle extended works better than having necessarily an officer to take control of the light. And the light at Main and Highway 10, we will have officers there because the general public has began to park in the commuter parking lot, and they're walking across Highway 10, so there's a lot of pedestrian traffic there. So we will have at least a couple of officers in that area. One of the things that we have found out for the Christmas parade, it is so large that we have to staff all the intersections so that no cars can come in on the parade itself, and that's where all our manpower will be focused on manning those positions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do you mind if I just?
Come on.
Just to also help with that, we met with PD and made some decisions to change the parade a little bit this year. The applications were capped at 50, and we are not going beyond that. We usually have far more than that in our parade. We also capped how many of each category that we were going to be able to accept because of the traffic issues. And the other thing that we are doing is we're moving the reviewing stand to in front of the fire station rather than on Main Street to pull that around.
Okay,
So just wanted to let you guys know that.
thanks, Judy.
Follow, Judy, real quickly. By doing that, you're going to ensure that the number of units does not overlap, correct?
That's
Yes, sir.
that's the hope.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
No further questions? That concludes public safety.
Thank you. Next is Water and Sewer. Chairman, Councilman Smith, Councilman Pack, and Councilman Gibbs. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real brief, we have a presentation on the lead and copper mailer. Can you explain to everyone what this is and why we're having to do that, please?
Yes, thank you. The updated EPA regulations require us to inventory and notify customers of their service lines. This was due to them October 15th. So we went out, we searched site plans, subdivision plans, and Public Works went out and visually inspected mains, water meters, and service lines. If they were not known, then we had to submit an unknown category. That ended up with 1,422 letters going out to just over our 3,000 connection points. And this is because we do not know the material of the service line. We have our drawings and inspections from the main to the meter, but it's the property owner from the service line and into that structure. At this point in time, we've created an email address, water@smithfieldva.gov, and we're asking residents that if they do know what their service line material is, that they do submit that information to us through that email address. That way we can update the inventory. We do submit this. This is registered in the database, and every year until that material is identified, we will continue to send out these letters.
Any questions about the process? I know we had a timeline you have to report in, right?
Correct. Our deadline to submit the information was October 15th, and then November 15th was the deadlines to send out the letters to the residents. They did go out Thursday.
And I got mine on Saturday, I think.
So how many houses have been identified?
So 1,422 are unknown at this point in time.
We didn't identify any town-owned, lead service lines or connections. I'm sure there may be some in the historic district that the private side has some lead involved with it, but as far as the town side, we didn't identify anything that was lead and copper.
And Mr. Clary, if the service line is unidentified, what is the responsibility, or what is the concern of the citizens? I mean, so they give this letter and they say, well, your service line's unidentified. Should they be worried? Should they try and figure it out? What was our recommended course of action?
So in the letter, there is a link and a web address, and if you click on that or go to that web address, it will give you a step-by-step guide on how to identify what material your service line consists of, whether it's a PVC, lead, galvanized. And so again, we're encouraging residents that if they do know or become aware of the material of their service line, that they do notify us so that we can then update our database.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question, Tammy. Is this concern about backflow possibilities into the system, or does that exist at all? Much like we have backflow preventers for faucets and so forth.
No, this is just a new updated revised regulation that these materials must be identified, and we do have to notify residents or customers of unknown materials.
Now, if they do have something that doesn't meet the requirements, are they responsible for changing it?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's our responsibility to notify them of the potential issues, and if they become aware of the fact that they have lead somewhere in their system, it would be upon them to change it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. So let's say somebody identifies their water line as lead, but they notify you that it's PVC.
Are you just taking their word for it?
So we went out and visually inspected, I don't remember the exact number, but Public Works employees, they did go out and dig up meters all across town to verify the main side and the service line side. So we will note that, but we also have a place to note that this was reported by the customer, not field verified.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Tammy.
Yes.
Where can I get a copy of that letter?
Sure, I can email it to you.
It is included in the packet,
Mm-hmm.
and
Under
we
that
sent it
letter.
to
It went out
every,
on Friday.
right, we mailed it to every household in the town of Smithfield, regardless of whether we had identified or not identified your line. So everybody in town got a
okay.
copy of it,
Okay.
just to make sure that everybody had the,
No,
Okay.
just to clarify, it
Sorry.
was the 1,422
That we-
that we
were
sent this
unknown.
particular letter to. Those were the address points that we did not know what the material was. So it's not saying that you do have lead, it's just saying that we don't know what your service line consists of.
I have a
we
question.
should have.
Yes.
My home was built 20 years ago, and the meter was put in at that point. In all likelihood, and I received a letter, but in all likelihood, if it's a 20-year-old home, I don't think it's going to be,
The federal government banned it in 1988.
thank you.
Sir.
Any other questions? If not, close water and sewer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next is Finance Committee with Chairman Pack, Councilman Smith, and Vice Mayor Butler. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll go ahead and open this up with the October financial statements and cash balances. Ms. Ross?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of Town Council, and welcome, Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to refer to it in a little bit more detail since you're here and you haven't had a chance to see what we're really presenting. The first page in of your financial statements will talk about the revenue and expenditures. Revenue collected to date is $2,086,486. That's 18.59% of the budgeted $11,222,000. This is expected because personal property taxes are due on December the 5th. We billed $1,683,260 on October the 29th, and there were 5,786 bills that were sent out. For this billing cycle, issues have been relatively few. The usual issues, someone sold their car and didn't report it, or someone moved and did not report it, just routine. Of course, the personal property revenue is low, but will increase next month. And some will come in this month as well. Pages 2 through 4 break down revenue by source. As you note, the majority of revenue to date comes from other local taxes, and that is $1,124,486. Additionally, $330,326 of overall revenue is general fund interest, which we will talk about during the cash balances portion. Meals tax was higher this month by $25,000, totaling $641,000 to date. Expenditures are, that would be a little bit further in. If you look at page, it starts breaking down by department. If you want to go into just a little bit more detail, overall expenditures through the month of October, $3,587,314, or 30% of budget, which is really where we expect it to be this time. Again, the footnotes detail specific information about the overall expenditures, and most of the departments are tracking to budget. Michael and I have had meetings with about half of the department heads to talk about where they are to budget. That way we can give a little bit more information about what's going on with each department. If you want to take a look at the debt, there's a debt breakdown in your packet, and it says debt at the end of the month in there. Total outstanding debt at the end of October is $4,029,357. We've made some payments to both the Series 20A2 and 20A1 in October. We won't owe again until April of '25. We're making the last payment on the VAC truck in August of next year, so that will be done, and that will be $99,349. We continue to make monthly payments on the 2022-B debt that was paid off, and that's in a line of credit at the bank. It's a line, not a usable line. The outstanding on that is $797,068. We do have a drawable line of credit, but that is unused at this point. I don't know if you all are aware, but the prime rate dropped again in November the 7th to 7.75. Eventually, that will change what our rate of return is on our investments, and I've kind of looked at what that could possibly do, so we'll track that. It could reduce our current investments. I'm just taking a stab at what I've seen it tracking at, and it could reduce our overall return by about $7,000. That would be for the month. We'll continue to look at that. We can take a look at the cash balances report, and that will be towards the end of your packet. We did make this a little bit more user-friendly, and I'm constantly going to work on making it easier to read. We are implementing the new bank accounts, and so this page will start to be a little bit longer because we're going to add the new bank accounts. We've reduced some bank accounts and changed some. We've taken the looter investment, put it off by itself in another account, and that's in a money market, as well as the regular investments that we have. So that will change just a little bit. But if we wanted to go and spend money today, usable balances are about $14 million. And that includes the investments that we have, bank balances and VIP usable balances are $22 million. And that takes into consideration anything that we have outstanding between intercompany balances and outstanding payables. Some questions on that? So if you want to look at your investment report, it's called Investment Benchmark. And as I mentioned, we may see a reduction in the rate that we earn. I'm guessing, and just taking a stab at it, that the suite may only earn us 4.25. We're used to seeing 5.37. The VIP may reduce to 4.67, and we're used to seeing about 5.4, so it's a slight decrease. But we can be hopeful. That's all I have.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Any questions for Ms. Ross? Hearing none. The next thing we have is our appropriation of funds to pay the Alouette County per our water and sewer agreement between the town and county. Michael?
As y'all may remember, back in November of '23, we entered into a revised water agreement with Alouette County that rewrote the agreements that existed at the time. As part of that, we did agree to compensate Alouette County the total amount of $1 million, $500,000 over 2 years, which would have been the amount of water sales they would have received from the town if we had stayed in those agreements. So included in your packet is a resolution that will appropriate the first half of that from the fund balance of the water fund and authorize us to go ahead and pay that invoice. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions? The only question I have is that I understand this appropriation, so Mr. Riddick, maybe you can help me with this. My next item on here is an invoice to pay this $500,000 to the county. I'm assuming we cannot put that on consent agenda. That needs to be an action item next month, because if we don't agree to the appropriations, we can't pay the invoice. Accurate?
You could put both as consent items and just have
Right.
the road.
They both have to be on the agenda.
Right, they would
Right.
be tied together, so if you pulled one, you'd have to pull the other.
Right.
Consent of council for consent agenda or action items? I mean, if the consent agenda makes sense if we are all okay with it, if that's fine. If not, if we need to have discussion on it and make decisions about it, then we'll make them action items. I'm either way.
I do remember there was some heartburn over this.
There was.
I
There
do
was.
remember that, and we came to the conclusion that what we were doing was the right thing. I know it's hard to swallow,
Yeah.
$1 million, so,
But,
but we understood the process, so.
Well, if there's no reason to discuss it again, let's move that we add the appropriation funds and the $500,000 invoice to council for consideration on the consent agenda. Everybody good with that? Okay. Very good. Anything else come before Finance Committee today? Hearing none, close Finance Committee.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, Public Buildings and Welfare. Members Vice Mayor Butler, Councilman Harris, and Councilman Tack. Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Bill, I want to officially welcome you to Town Council. Looking forward to serving with you. Since I didn't get the opportunity, there were no council member comments at the beginning of the committee meetings. So I do want to acknowledge that. The first thing on the agenda is amendment to proffers. Mallory Point, Tammy.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. The applicant is proposing the following amendments. This would be the first one is for item 14C, which references the two-lane roundabout. The original traffic modeling actually only modeled for a single-lane roundabout and did find that it was single lane under the current and the ultimate build-out conditions. Also included is a diagram which divides the roundabout and the slip lane into two phases. The roundabout would be phase 1 and the slip lane would be phase 2. The revised proffers, as stated in the 4 bullet points, this would require the construction of phase 1, the roundabout, which shall be completed prior to phase B, C, and D, which is all on the north side of Battery Park Road. They will dedicate the needed right-of-way for a future second lane on that roundabout, should future analysis require it. Phase 2, which will be the slip lane going from Nike Park, the dedicated slip lane from Nike Park to Battery Park Road, they will have to acquire the right-of-way prior to site plan approval for phase E and F, which is the Scott Farm parcel, and then the construction improvements must be completed for that slip lane prior to the first CO of phase E and F, which is on that Nike Park Battery Park corner. Additionally, Isle of Wight County's Transportation Administrator did request the removal of item 14H. This involves the analysis at the future extension of Reynolds. This is because their current analysis indicates that this will not be required, and so the county did suggest that this be removed from their proffer statement. Thank you.
It should be, we should note too, VDOT has reviewed all of these and are in agreement that these are the improvements that will be needed based off of the projections.
That is correct. The county and VDOT both were fine with these proffer modifications.
Who's chair on this?
Any questions,
Question, yes.
Randy?
I'm reading this proffer modification, and they've proffered a 2-lane roundabout. And they're suggesting to go to a 1-lane roundabout, but kind of the way that I read it is that it's only striped as a one-way. I guess my question is, if it's striped as a one-way, does that mean it's still built at the same width, so that if future traffic needs were to require a 2-lane roundabout, they could restripe it? Or is this a reduction in size as well?
This would be a reduction in the size of the roundabout. They are going to dedicate right-of-way so that if a future traffic analysis does indicate that a second lane would be required, the right-of-way would already be available.
But not built?
Correct.
Okay.
How did you define that other lane that comes from Nike Park Road where you bear to the right on Battery Park Road?
The slip lane?
Slip lane. So would that be caution it won't be a traffic light there. Will there,
There will not be a light there.
Okay.
It will venture off of the roundabout, cutting a little bit through on that parcel that's currently existing, and then it will merge with Battery Park on the other side of, the Gatling Point side of the roundabout.
and so that's gonna remain a two-lane highway?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Vice Mayor, I think in lieu, correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, in lieu of caution lights, there will be yield signs likely put at every point as you enter into the roundabout to ensure that you know that you must yield if you're not already in the roundabout. I looked at the roundabout that's over in Newport News over by the airport, because I had to go over there this weekend or whatever, and that's what they do. There's no caution lights there, but every entrance as you go, you must yield to anything inside that roundabout.
But this slip lane does not go into the roundabout?
That is correct.
You know, okay,
Okay.
I misunderstood, but I'm just, as far as the caution aspect of it.
Is there any more discussion?
Yes, I'd like to follow up on what Randy said. I saw that as well, and I don't understand, pardon for being the new guy, but the second lane, they're saying that the room will be there, the right-of-way would be there. But the statement in here is, should a future traffic study determine or warrant request that somebody else can build it and pay for it in the future? So
That's right.
who would build and pay for it?
It would be if another development were to come to the town to seek approval and their traffic impact analysis said that one was warranted, then they would have to make that improvement. The traffic impact analysis for this development does not warrant the second lane of the roundabout. So at this time, VDOT is in agreement that even with all the projected build out of Mallory Point, the second lane would not be needed.
So there's no way that our going along with this commits the town
No, sir.
to any financial responsibility in the future?
But it could.
Yes.
It could.
If background traffic ever got to a point where it needed it, then potentially. But all of the traffic that was considered as part of the analysis for this project did not warrant the second lane of the roundabout.
So is there a reason we wouldn't get out in front of that and have it done now?
It's difficult to make that developer build something that is not warranted by their traffic impact analysis. That's where we would start to have some difficulties.
Wasn't their TIA though initially calling for that, and that's why they proffered this?
When they went back and analyzed the modeling, it was actually only modeled as a single lane roundabout.
So the original traffic impact analysis was actually modeled on a single lane.
There's a two-lane roundabout by Riverstone Chop House and College Drive there. Anybody familiar with that concept?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's humongous. I mean, it's really big. And that's one of the more awkward roundabouts that I've been through. I've been through a handful, especially since being on council, we've talked about these. Single lane roundabouts are pretty simple. I don't know exactly how to handle a two-lane roundabout, but that's the only one I can think of in the area.
And I always get mixed up on it when I'm coming from College Drive to go through Eagle Harbor, Harborview.
Harborview, yes.
I should be in the left lane to go to Harborview, but I always get in the right lane.
Yes. That one's a little confusing. So I only bring that up not to make a case one way or the other for this, but I like to envision things when we're talking about them rather than just using them. This is a change of proffers, and I was, Mayor Bowman may remember that VMRC never favored after-the-fact approval on a lot of projects that we saw, and this is not after the fact by any means, but we've already approved a contentious project, and now we're asking to make the proffers a little more amenable to the developer. I don't think it's a bad idea, because I think having what's there, the right thing that's there is what should be there. That's what's best for the community, is what should be there is what should be there, not what was just proffered. But I do have a little bit of heartburn changing proffers, particularly reducing the scope of something. I would feel a little bit more comfortable saying, okay, why don't you build it and stripe it as a one-lane roundabout, and that way, if it was ever needed to go to a two-lane roundabout, the infrastructure is already there. That's kind of how I feel on this one.
I have a question. It looks like to me that they're gonna have to address it anyway, like you said, down the road, when they talk about the first CO of the Scott Farm, so that nothing is actually being done until that development starts in the Scott Farm instead of Mallory. So it looks like to me that, I'm like you, it looks like to me that it needs to be already there, so that we know the growth is gonna happen there anyway, so why wait for a CO on that part? Maybe I'm reading that wrong.
To clarify, the roundabout is going to be constructed for the Phase B, C, and D, which is not the Scott Farm
Right.
section. For total build-out, a single-lane roundabout, the modeling proved that that was sufficient to handle the Mallory growth along with the background traffic at this point in time. We did have the roundabout divided from the slip lane. So the slip lane is what is being triggered with the COs of the Scott Farm. We wanted to make sure that they had acquired the necessary right-of-way from the property owner that owns that small parcel on the corner before we approved any sort of site plans for the Scott Farm, because the Scott Farm part of the development is what triggers the slip lane. This will ensure that they have the right-of-way to construct the slip lane that's needed for that part of the development.
So where does the two-lane come in at then?
The two-lane was originally proffered. Again, the modeling, when they went
Okay.
back and looked at the modeling, it was actually modeled only as a single lane. It was not modeled as a two-lane roundabout.
And the only time a two-lane would ever be needed is if another development were to be approved that increased the traffic volumes to a level that then warranted a two-lane roundabout.
Do we have the right-of-way for that?
They would dedicate that as part of this
Okay.
proper change. They agreed to dedicate the right-of-way in case one is ever needed.
And the likelihood of that being pretty high?
No, I don't know that I would say that. I think it takes quite a bit of traffic before a two-lane is ever warranted.
Okay.
And VDOT's doing a lot of push to try to get back to one-lane roundabouts because of the issues that have kind of been mentioned about two lanes. So and we can probably find the traffic volume that it would take to go from a one to a two-lane, but they didn't indicate that they saw anything in the future that would get there. I'm sure we have the traffic volume numbers, and we can tell you how much more it would take to get to a two-lane.
Well, Battery Park and Nike Park would both need to be 4 lanes before,
That was the other piece of it, was that right now a two-lane, quite honestly, doesn't function because there are not two lanes for it to dump into. It would only be needed once Battery Park and Nike Park went to 4 lanes each, that then a two-lane roundabout would actually function, because there's not 2 lanes going into it.
According to VDOT, single-lane roundabouts handle up to 25,000 vehicles per day. When we reached out to them about the single lane versus the
and
second
where are
lane.
we now, and maybe at build out? How about,
I was
No, that's
just
putting you on the
25,000 on the center.
The other question is, how much, an hour does it handle?
I may be off. I'm gonna say we're about half that right
yeah,
now.
I think that's what we are too.
I think
I think we're about
10 to
12,000.
15,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's what it is, but I don't want to
Right.
quote that.
I don't have,
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
That's
That's fair.
memory serves me, is that we're in that 10 to 15,000 range.
And what they're asking basically for this is to build a little bit slightly smaller roundabout, but leave the land there in case we ever needed to improve it down the road. But that's basically the request in a nutshell.
And if we don't approve it, they don't have to buy the right of way, correct?
Well, if we don't approve it and leave the proper how it is, they have to build a 2-lane roundabout,
And
which
that's it.
would kind of be silly too, though. That's why I was saying, we could require them to build a 2-lane roundabout and stripe it as a 1-lane, and then you just have a giant one-way roundabout, 1-lane roundabout. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense either. The developer's certainly gonna think it doesn't, and I think they could make a case that it doesn't.
Are there any plans to widen Battery Park to additional lanes in Nike Park?
Not at this time. No.
Chicken or the egg comment again is, you know, there's not enough homes there, yet there's about to be, so. Until the traffic warrants going to 4 lanes, VDOT's not gonna move on it. That's not necessarily the best way to be, but unfortunately, that's the reality we're stuck with. I mean, I feel certain that if they were designing it now, we'd be 5 years out. You know, and since they're not, we're probably 10, maybe 20.
Well, I think you have to look at your potential for additional growth and additional developments, and there really isn't any. There's no land.
Not there.
You have to be on if you go on the Nike Park side towards 17, there is, but there's not on our side.
Not coming from the town's direction.
Correct. Correct. Headed out. Correct. Headed out to 17.
Now,
There's.
You're right. Back towards 17, there's a lot of undeveloped land, but it's not. That's assuming that you're bringing traffic into town instead of going the logical way to Newport News, probably.
That's true.
I mean, I just can't.
I'd hope they come into town and spend all their money in town, you know, right?
I can't think of a piece of land that would need potential development to generate that kind of traffic.
Not between South Church Street and Nike Park. There's not, because that's in the works now.
Is there any more discussion about the amendment to the proffers for Mallory Point? If not, we'll move this along for consideration to Town Council. Number 2 is dedication of plat. Tammy?
Yes, thank you. The applicant is seeking town council acceptance for the dedication of approximately 17.458 acres of parcel B from parcel A, T-pin 2301008. In addition, they will be providing a 25-foot strip dedicated to the town for right-of-way purposes. The zoning ordinance does allow town council at its discretion to accept common open space, recreational areas, and other common properties at the time of plat recordation. The final plat was approved at the Tuesday, November 12th Planning Commission meeting.
As you may recall, this has been something council has talked about for a while, and initially it was a donation of what they thought was about 5 acres. Once they did the full survey, it's actually 17 that the developer is looking to donate to the town for any future use we may have.
There is RPA located on the property, and so the usable amount of acreage might be closer to maybe the 5 to 6 acres.
Question, do we know that it is at least 5 or 6 acres? Because we don't want to buy a pig in a poke or accept one.
Let's see,
And
plat.
I couldn't quite tell from
The plat, okay. Apologize, I'm pulling up the plat now.
It's a pretty large
yeah,
set.
Yes.
it's well over 5,
Okay.
probably closer to maybe 10 acres of usable.
I think,
Approving a plat doesn't, you're not accepting the property
Sure.
until they tender a deed and you accept the deed. So this is the first step, but it's not, you're not, by doing this, you've not accepted the property.
well, I still think it's a good idea because in the future, you know, who knows with a build out, what type of emergency services you may need down at that corner of town, whatever, could certainly be a potential for that.
So the only thing, you know, I always think it's a good idea if somebody's going to give you some land for no charge.
Yeah.
Generally a pretty good deal.
Yep.
Our only look at this is that we do have to maintain this property. Like, keep the grass cut or whatever, but I believe it's farm now. If we can keep a farming relationship on it, that
Take care of
solves
that.
that problem.
That had been my intent, was
Yeah.
that we enter into an agreement with whoever's farming it now to continue to farm and maintain it.
The only problem you're gonna have with that, though, is kind of like the, situation we had in Windsor Castle. When, if that is, that's not the only piece of open land, right?
No.
So it may get to the point where it's not
Attractive to a
financially
farmer,
attractive to a
yes.
farmer to do it. And so you really, you might be able to find somebody, but it just depends on whether it makes sense to them or not. Because we had that same situation with Mr. Stallings over in Windsor
Yeah.
Castle.
When he got into spraying Roundup
Well,
and whatnot,
but
that really made him nervous. You got
gonna end up
neighborhoods on
with the
both
same
sides.
Situation with all the.
Yeah, you had neighborhoods on both sides
That's
there.
right. Because they're gonna complain, farmers, they spray pesticides and
Yep.
herbicides and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, just, we need to consider that as a council, do we want to mow the grass a couple times a year there? Do we want to, we may be able to farm it, we may not be able to, but, if somebody's gonna give us property, and to Mayor Bowman's point, I mean, we don't know what our future needs are there. And when they brought this to us, I thought it was a great opportunity for us. I just wanna make sure that we're open about the unintended consequences of acquiring property.
Unintended consequences?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, what I mean by that is that we now own the property and we're now responsible for the upkeep of the property, as opposed to just taking 17 acres and saying, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. Well, we don't have any plans for a police department or fire department or rescue squad there, but we may one day. I mean, it makes sense to have it. But in the meantime, we do have to maintain the property, and this was dedicated open area as part of the Mallory Scott Farm development. So they're going to develop parcel A that's on your map here, and this parcel B was part of their open area, and that would come out of the development. That would be on the town property at this point.
True. Well, and I understand that. I guess, is it a hindrance to us to enter into an agreement because maybe we don't want to maintain it? Will that be a problem?
I don't think so. I think it's worth doing.
I do too.
Oh,
I just
okay.
think from a foresightful perspective, if it, based on what's been said as far as the useful amount of property that's there, from a strategic perspective, it gives us an opportunity to do something ahead of the game.
In the future.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I've seen a picture of this plat before, but I can't seem to find it. Can I get a copy of that?
Well,
in your packet.
you mean as it relates to the
Yep.
rest of the development?
Yep.
If you go back to the prior application having to do with the right-of-way?
Yep.
There's a
This is
phasing
cool.
plan, and it
Yeah.
shows you
Yep.
how this relates to their development.
Puts it in context.
If you kind of puts it in context.
got
If
it.
you go, yeah.
What I'll do too is I'll reach out and try to identify who is currently farming that and see if we can't have a conversation.
Well, as long as they're farming next door, they probably are fine. It's just
Well,
when
that's
that
right.
gets built out that you run into an issue where
But
it's
I'll
potentially.
have that
Yeah.
conversation. I had a similar agreement in Windsor with a piece that was actually smaller than this.
Yeah.
Any more discussion?
Yes, if I may, just one more time, Michael. There has been an examination of the land that says that there's at least 5 acres of,
Yes, sir. Included
Buildable.
in the packet is a survey that shows where the RPA buffer is and where the wetlands buffer is. And you can tell maybe there's a third of the property that's in RPA, so the other 2/3 are viable.
Any more questions? We'll move it along to Town Council for consideration. Thanks, Tammy. The next item on the agenda is Habitat for Humanity. Michael?
Yes, ma'am. I was contacted by Supervisor Roundtree, who had been contacted by Habitat for Humanity, that they were looking for some potential build sites in White County. So working with staff, we looked at properties that the town owned that may be viable building sites. We identified one, which is at the end of West Street in Old Jersey Park. There's a copy of the plat in your packet. We did meet on site with the gentleman from Habitat for Humanity. We have also done our own work as far as setbacks and whether we think there's a building envelope there that they could fit their product in, and there is. So this is on your agenda just for discussion to kind of see whether there's interest in us moving forward with this project. If not, then we'll kind of stop where we are. We have not committed to anything. We've just looked at the site. So we'd be at this point now whether there's appetite on council to proceed with this. We have not talked about whether the town would donate the land, sell the land. That conversation hasn't come up. But it's just get input from you guys before we start moving too much further forward.
I'm definitely in favor of the town donating the land.
The current assessed value is only about $6,500. It's not a very big lot, and it's adjacent to one of our pump stations. Looking at the plat, the only parcel that we would be considering donating or selling to Habitat would be that lot all the way to the right there. So we would retain all the property around the pump station, which would give us access to the pump station and expansion room if we ever need it.
Madam Chair?
All right, so that's lot 22 on here?
The one beside that, 21.
21, okay,
Lot 21 is ours, 22 is privately owned, and it has a house already on it.
okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, this may sound like a personal statement, it is. My son, who's currently finishing up at UVA, is in a fraternity that does philanthropic work. And every year they have, in the last 4 years, had 2 charities that they worked with as far as having special projects, intramural basketball tournaments and things like that. One of them deals with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. The other deals with Habitat for Humanity. And they raise a significant amount of money every year and donate it to Habitat for Humanity. And the response that they get when they go back to the home after it's built and the new homeowner sees the fruits of their labor and the fruits of the contributions that are made, he said, you just won't believe it. So I just think that if we have an opportunity, as Councilman Gibbs said, as far as a donation is concerned, to provide for our community, I think we should. I'm in support of going forward. Maybe some more due diligence needs to be done to find out exactly where we are and who's going to do what and things like that. But I think to just say, put foot down and say no would not be the appropriate thing, and I would not be in support of that. So that's my 2 cents worth with a little background information as to why I think it's important that we work to try to make sure this gets done. That's what government is supposed to do, I think. I don't mean to give a sermon, but that's what I believe. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Bill?
Yes, one more time. First, endorse what Steve just said 100%. You might have been at Nampson, Suffolk when we did this project. We did Habitat for Humanity at a couple homes. Yeah, I don't remember. Years.
Been 30 years.
Yeah, every bit. 60 if you count it. 30 for me and 30 for you. Has the town done this before? Donated land to projects or Habitat or anybody
There
else?
have been Habitat projects in town before. I remember working on one when, 25 to 30 years ago. So I'm not aware of any recently, but I know there have been Habitat projects in town before, but I couldn't speak to whether the town donated the property or not.
We were looking at the corner of James and Washington at one point for potential Habitat project, and it never came to fruition. There was discussion, but that's 12 years, that's all I remember.
That's the area that I worked on one eons ago, was in that area, but it was 2 homes.
Was it on Clay Street? Because I heard Bobby Clark say something about a Habitat for Humanity project.
I would have been working with them on that, but that was a long time ago. So there's a history there, but it's a long history.
There was a company years ago called Aero Affordable Housing. This was about 25 years ago, and I think they did a habitat project. Can't remember where it was, but we've had something like this come along. It's been a long time ago.
So if there's interest, I will meet with the gentleman from Habitat and get deeper into the details. You would have to have a public hearing to dispose of the property. So that would be a step we'd have to do, which won't be a lot, but I'll make sure we get those additional details, and we will have more information by the time we get to that.
So I probably won't be here for the next conversation on this, but will you consider putting a timeline on it so that if we agree to donate or sell, whatever, that they have a certain amount of time not to exceed before it reverts back to the town? The last thing we want to do is sit there for 10 years and not be used.
Right, I will, and I'll have that conversation to see what their timeline is. I mean, he seemed to pretty much be ready to go whenever he was working on a project in Chesapeake, and he would sounded like he would start the paperwork pretty soon.
Is that timeline for us or for Habitat?
For them.
For Habitat
Yeah, for them.
if we said, okay, we get all our ducks in a row and we give them the property and they don't ever do anything with it, I'd like the property to come back to the town after whatever time you guys feel is appropriate, you know.
Have you known Habitat to operate in that manner before? Where they've been donated land?
I
I'm asking
haven't.
Michael.
No, I don't know that I would have that experience.
Okay.
Well, but
First time for everything.
Well, I'm involved in this Odyssey Foundation, and they have, in Suffolk, they have had that problem. So, it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Well, honestly, let's cut to the chase. If they're serious about it, we'll give them a certain timeline, and you either do it or you don't, and
It can always be extended.
you sure can,
Yeah.
but it's ours to do it.
But you can put a reverter in the deed, and then put you would put a reasonable time period, because, gosh, just plan approval takes
Oh, sure.
months and months,
Sure.
but, one thing else, Mr. Mayor and members of council, if you look at this, and this might be a question for Michael and Public Works, but you see parcel 20, which is the pump station looks to be all the way over at 20A, and then there's a fenced-in area. It looks like that you might be able to slide that property line 10 feet or more to the west, maybe, if it's northwest oriented. And that's a simple boundary adjustment and Mike knows this as well as anyhow. With a lot like that, you're gonna need everything you can to work with, because a 50-foot lot is not an easy lot to build on.
It's just like the one they just built on down Main Street.
Right.
I mean, on Church Street.
But, and I don't know, maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, but that's just, it looks like the part of lot 20 is just grass to cut.
Yeah, I've got one question. This brings it back into the tax rolls, does it?
It does.
Okay.
It's almost like a reverse thought process of what we just discussed as far as the deed down at Mallory Point. This will get it away from us as far as maintain on the tax rolls, as you said, Councilman Smith. And like I said, with the certain guardrails put on it, I don't see anything but good to come from it. And if it doesn't, we tried.
Yes, sir. All right. We'll move forward, and I'll bring back something else before we get there.
So we won't forward this to town council until you have a conversation or work out the logistics
Yes,
with
ma'am.
them? All right, thank you, Michael.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank y'all.
Number 4, interest corridor overlay guidelines for review. Tammy?
Yes, thank you.
She's got a smile on her face. This worries me a little bit right off the bat.
Planning Commission has forwarded the second draft with staff comments to Town Council. We foresee this being a public hearing item in January, along with our historic district guidelines. We did want to go ahead and provide you the second draft ahead of time in case you had any comments or suggestions. Staff is still going through and adding a couple additional comments before we send it back over to our consultants for the final draft.
So this is just to give you time to start reading and digesting, and it'll be on December's committee agenda as well for additional discussion before it hits public hearing.
This is just for an updating the entrance
Yes.
corridor? Oh,
Yes, that is correct. Both the entrance corridor and the historic district guidelines were last updated in 2005. Again, we're just looking at bringing new material, new pictures. A lot of the photos that were included in those documents were not photos within town limits. We really wanted to bring that document as a whole, both of them, to kind of feature the town.
Question?
Mayor.
This sounds like a loaded question, and it is. Are you satisfied with it?
Yes, sir. My staff has been commenting throughout the first draft and the second draft. That's why there are still our comments on it. But yes, we are satisfied.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor.
Any other discussions? Well, we'll wait for the final submission from staff, and at that time, we will pass it on to town council for consideration.
Yes, this is the second draft. We will be providing our comments to the consultants, so when it does come for public hearing in January, it will be the final version for final comments.
Public hearing for us in January?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Tammy, is it possible to get this to our newly elected officials as well, so that their first meeting, they're not hit with a, this is a thorough guideline. I would like them to at least have the opportunity to have seen it before they,
Yes, sir.
before they arrive.
They received it as part of the.
They did. Very good. Okay. Just making sure.
Any other topics for discussion? If not, I will close public buildings and welfare.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. The only other items I've got is just to advise you that at the upcoming council meeting, we'll have a presentation from Western Tidewater Free Clinic by Tim Palmer, presentation of Certified Crime Prevention Community Award. I imagine that Chief Howell will be taking care of that along with the town manager. Approval of town council summary minutes from November 6, 2004. And if it please the council, could you have Sergeant Lester here so that we could recognize him and you could say a few words for the next council meeting? That's okay?
Yes, sir. And I do have one other thing I
Mr.
forgot
Stallings?
to do earlier. I do want to introduce Mr. Ed Heidi, our new Public Works Director.
Hey.
Everybody. He started last Tuesday, so he's been here a week.
You still here?
He comes to us from Suffolk, so we look forward to working with him, but wanted everybody to meet him and put a name with a face.
Ed, good to have you here. Thank you very much for having faith in us. We'll have faith in you, promise. Anyone else have anything to come before town council? Questions, comments, answers? If not, meeting adjourned. Thank y'all very much.